On March 14, 2012, at 7:35 p.m., casino security guard Michael Rodriguez encountered something impossible outside the Fremont Street Experience in downtown Las Vegas. A young woman, barefoot and dressed in filthy layers of torn fabric, was begging for change near a tourist entrance. Her hair hung in matted tangles past her waist. Her skin was deeply weathered and scarred, and she moved with a shuffling, uncertain gait that suggested years without proper footwear. When Rodriguez approached to offer assistance, the woman flinched violently, cowering against the wall. She whispered in a hoarse voice, "The Prophet says I must gather offerings for the final purification." Rodriguez later told investigators, "I've worked security on the Strip for 15 years. I've seen everything. But this woman looked like she'd been living in the desert for years, not months." What Rodriguez couldn't have known was that he had just found Cassandra Nicole Price, a 23-year-old college student from Phoenix, who had disappeared during a group camping trip in Joshua Tree National Park nearly 3 years earlier. Cassandra Nicole Price was everything a conscientious young woman should be: studious, reliable, and excited about her future. At 23 years old, she was in her final semester at Arizona State University, majoring in communications with a minor in photography. She lived in a shared apartment near campus with 2 roommates, worked part-time at a campus bookstore, and maintained a solid B average while juggling work and school. Friends described her as outgoing, creative, and eager to experience new adventures. Though she had limited outdoor experience beyond occasional day hikes with friends, she had never done serious backcountry camping before the Joshua Tree trip. Her online presence showed a typical college senior: photos of campus events, coffee shop study sessions, and expressions of excitement about graduating and starting a career in marketing. Cassandra stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed approximately 130 pounds, and had shoulder-length brown hair and green eyes. She lived modestly on student loans and part-time work, maintained close relationships with her parents in Phoenix, and had recently started dating a classmate named Tyler Bennett. Those who knew her said she seemed happy and optimistic in the spring of 2009, looking forward to graduation in May and a possible job offer from a Phoenix marketing firm. On March 20, 2009, Cassandra joined a group camping trip to Joshua Tree National Park, organized by the ASU Outdoor Adventure Club. The trip was planned as a spring break getaway for 8 students, most with minimal camping experience. The group leader was Jake Martinez, a senior environmental science major with some wilderness experience, and his girlfriend Amanda Foster served as co-leader. The other participants included Cassandra, Tyler Bennett, and 4 other students: Nicole Harper, David Sullivan, Maria Gonzalez, and Robert Taylor. None were experienced wilderness campers, but all were enthusiastic about the trip. The group planned to camp at a designated campground within Joshua Tree for 3 nights, with day hikes to popular rock formations and photo opportunities. On March 20th at 10:30 a.m., the group departed Phoenix in 3 vehicles, arriving at Joshua Tree National Park around 3 p.m. They registered at the entrance station, paid the camping fees, and drove to Hidden Valley Campground, where they had reserved 2 campsites. The weather forecast predicted clear skies with daytime temperatures in the mid-70s and nighttime lows in the mid-40s. The group set up tents, prepared dinner, and spent the evening around a campfire, taking photos and enjoying the desert landscape. On March 21, 2009, at 9:00 a.m., the group embarked on a planned day hike to Barker Dam, approximately a 2-mile loop trail. The hike was intended to be easy and suitable for beginners, with the group planning to return to camp by early afternoon. Jake Martinez's log shows the group departed camp together, all carrying day packs with water, snacks, sunscreen, and basic supplies. Cassandra carried a small digital camera and had expressed excitement about photographing the desert landscape. The group reached Barker Dam without incident around 10:15 a.m., spending time photographing the area and exploring the rock formations. At approximately 11:30 a.m., the group began the return hike to the trailhead. Tyler Bennett later testified that Cassandra was taking photos throughout the hike, occasionally falling behind the group to capture specific shots. The group maintained a loose formation with faster hikers ahead and slower members trailing. At 12:15 p.m., when the group reassembled at the trailhead parking area, they realized Cassandra was not with them. Jake Martinez conducted a head count and confirmed Cassandra Price was missing. The group immediately began retracing their steps along the trail, calling Cassandra's name and checking side paths. Tyler Bennett recalled that Cassandra had been visible approximately 10 minutes before they reached the parking area, photographing a rock formation about 50 yards off the main trail. The group searched for 30 minutes along the trail and in the immediate area without finding any trace of Cassandra. At 12:50 p.m., Jake Martinez called 911 to report Cassandra missing. Park rangers arrived at the scene at 1:20 p.m. and began an immediate search of the area. Ranger Thomas Bradley interviewed each group member separately about when they had last seen Cassandra and her planned route. Cassandra's vehicle, a 2005 Honda Accord, remained at the campground with her personal belongings, wallet, and phone inside the tent. Her small daypack, camera, water bottle, and sunglasses were missing with her. Joshua Tree search and rescue operations began in full force at 2:30 p.m. on March 21st. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department coordinated with National Park Service rangers, deploying 2 K9 units and 48 volunteer searchers. The initial search grid covered a 3-square-mile area surrounding the Barker Dam Trail. K9 units picked up Cassandra's scent along the trail and tracked it to a rocky area approximately 100 yards west of the main path, then lost the trail completely near a cluster of large boulders. Helicopter surveys on March 22 and 23 revealed no visual evidence of a hiker in distress. Ground teams meticulously searched every wash, boulder pile, and potential shelter area within the expanded search zone. On March 23, searchers discovered Cassandra's digital camera lying in sand near a rock formation about 200 yards from where her scent trail ended. The camera appeared undamaged, though the lens cap was missing. Photos on the memory card showed Cassandra's progression along the hike, with the final image timestamped at 11:58 a.m., showing a close-up of a Joshua tree. The camera's location intensified the search in that immediate area, but no additional evidence was found. The search expanded on March 24 to include adjacent wilderness areas and all maintained trails within a 5-mile radius. FBI agents joined the investigation on March 26, conducting interviews with campground visitors and examining Cassandra's background for any indication she might have disappeared voluntarily. Her bank account showed no activity after March 19. Her credit cards showed no charges. Her phone remained in her tent, powered off. Her social media accounts showed no activity after a post on March 20 expressing excitement about the camping trip. Friends and family uniformly stated Cassandra had no reason to disappear and had been happy and engaged with her life. By March 30, after 10 days of intensive searching involving more than 200 personnel, the operation scaled back to periodic aerial sweeps and limited ground teams. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department spokesperson Captain Linda Hayes told reporters that ground teams had covered over 150 square miles of terrain. Hayes stated, "We've searched every accessible location multiple times. The terrain is extremely rugged with countless places someone could be hidden. We're not giving up, but we're adjusting our approach." The active search officially suspended on April 7, 2009. Cassandra's parents, Michael and Jennifer Price, appeared at a press conference on April 15, pleading for any information about their daughter. Jennifer Price's statement, delivered through tears, included the words, "Cassie is our only child. She's smart and careful. She wouldn't just wander off. Someone must know what happened. Please, if you saw anything, call the police." Local news coverage gradually diminished through April and May. On July 15, 2009, the San Bernardino County Medical Examiner's Office issued a presumed death certificate for Cassandra Nicole Price. State law required substantial evidence that death had occurred, and the combination of the exhaustive search, complete absence of contact, and harsh desert conditions met the legal threshold. Tyler Bennett later described receiving news of the presumed death declaration as the moment I had to accept she was really gone, even though we never found her. A memorial service was held in Phoenix on August 8, 2009. Approximately 400 people attended, including Cassandra's college friends, professors, work colleagues, and members of the hiking community who had participated in the search. Tyler Bennett gave a eulogy describing Cassandra as the person who made every room brighter just by being in it. A small life insurance policy paid out in October 2009. The Price family established a scholarship at Arizona State University for communication students in Cassandra's name. Her apartment was cleared, her belongings packed and stored. By fall 2009, the case appeared in regional cold case databases, and the Price family maintained a website dedicated to Cassandra's memory and keeping her name visible. On March 14, 2012, nearly 3 years after Cassandra's disappearance, casino security guard Michael Rodriguez was conducting routine patrols outside the Fremont Street Experience in downtown Las Vegas at 7:35 p.m. The location was approximately 300 miles from Joshua Tree National Park, in a densely populated urban area. Rodriguez noticed a young woman begging near a tourist entrance, which was not uncommon in the area. What caught his attention was her appearance. She was barefoot despite the concrete being warm from the day's heat, wearing filthy layers of torn and ragged fabric that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. Her hair hung in severe tangles past her waist, matted with debris. Her skin was deeply weathered, marked with visible scars and burns in patterns across her exposed arms and shoulders. She moved with an unusual shuffling gait, appearing uncertain how to navigate the sidewalk. Rodriguez approached to offer assistance, thinking perhaps she was a homeless individual in need of help. When he got closer, he noticed the woman's eyes had a distant, unfocused quality. She spoke in a hoarse whisper. "The prophet says I must gather offerings for the final purification. Do you have offerings?" Rodriguez immediately called for backup and requested an ambulance. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers arrived within minutes, along with paramedics from University Medical Center. The woman initially resisted assistance, saying repeatedly, "The prophet has not given permission for me to leave. The work is not complete." Paramedic Sarah Walsh approached slowly, offering water and a blanket. The woman seemed confused by the water bottle, uncertain how to open it. Walsh's preliminary assessment noted severe malnutrition, estimated body weight 85 pounds, pulse 115 beats per minute, blood pressure 88/55, and core body temperature 95.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The woman's feet showed extreme callousing and scarring consistent with years of barefoot walking. Her hands displayed multiple poorly healed fractures and severe scarring. Burn marks in deliberate circular patterns covered both forearms. She had crude tattoos on both shoulders, symbols paramedics couldn't identify. Her teeth showed advanced decay and her gums were bleeding. When Walsh asked her name, the woman stared blankly for nearly a minute before whispering, "The prophet calls me Sister Seeker. I had another name before, but it is forbidden." Walsh asked if she remembered where she was from, and the woman said, "I came from the deceived world. The prophet rescued me from corruption." During the 20-minute transport to University Medical Center, the woman remained largely unresponsive to questions, occasionally whispering fragments, "The compound in the Valley of Stones," and "The prophet's temple must be completed," and "Brother Joshua is with the divine now. I couldn't save him." At 8:15 p.m., the woman was admitted to the emergency department under the designation Jane Doe, possible psychiatric emergency. Dr. Patricia Foster led the medical team conducting the preliminary examination. Blood work revealed severe vitamin D deficiency, anemia with hemoglobin at 7.2 grams per deciliter, and multiple nutritional deficiencies consistent with years of severely inadequate diet. X-rays showed evidence of 6 healed rib fractures of varying ages, a healed fracture of the left ulna, multiple healed fractures in both hands and feet, and significant bone density loss. Dental examination revealed 7 missing teeth, several broken teeth, and advanced periodontal disease. A full-body examination documented 89 distinct scars, including deliberate burn marks arranged in patterns on her forearms, back, and shoulders. The crude tattoos on her shoulders appeared to be made with ash or charcoal, pressed into wounds, creating raised scar tissue in geometric patterns. Toxicology screens came back negative for drugs and alcohol, but showed severely elevated cortisol levels consistent with extreme prolonged stress. Dr. Foster's preliminary report noted, patient presents with physical evidence consistent with approximately 3 years of severe deprivation, manual labor, and systematic trauma. Psychological state suggests profound dissociation and possible captivity-related syndrome. The patient was admitted to the psychiatric unit for observation and stabilization. For the first 36 hours, she remained largely catatonic, occasionally muttering the same phrases paramedics had documented. On March 16th at 10 a.m., psychiatric nurse Barbara Reeves attempted to establish the patient's identity. The woman kept repeating that she was Sister Seeker and that her previous name was from the deceived world. Dr. Michael Thornton, a specialist in trauma psychology, spent 3 hours with the patient on March 16th. He noted profound dissociation, trauma bonding symptoms, and what appeared to be cult indoctrination. On March 17th, during a session with Dr. Thornton, the woman mentioned she had attended a place of learning in the City of the Sun before the Prophet rescued her. She also mentioned friends from before the purification, and a male companion whose name she couldn't recall clearly. These fragments suggested possible memories of a life before captivity. Detective Marcus Sullivan of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department was assigned to the case on March 17th. Sullivan requested that the woman be fingerprinted, hoping to identify her through criminal or employment records. The fingerprinting process was difficult as the woman became agitated, saying, "The Prophet does not permit marking or documentation." On March 18th, fingerprint analysis through the FBI database returned a match with prints on file for Cassandra Nicole Price, whose Arizona driver's license had been digitized and stored in the system. The match was flagged as belonging to a presumed deceased individual from a 2009 missing persons case. DNA analysis using samples from Michael and Jennifer Price confirmed with 99.9% certainty on March 19th that the patient was Cassandra Nicole Price. Detective Sullivan contacted Michael and Jennifer Price on March 19th at 2:00 p.m. Sullivan later described the conversation as one of the most difficult calls I've ever made, telling parents their daughter, who they'd mourned for 3 years, was alive but in severe psychological distress. Jennifer Price later stated, "I couldn't believe what Detective Sullivan was telling me. We'd said goodbye to Cassie. We'd accepted she was gone. Hearing she was alive was joy and horror mixed together." Michael and Jennifer Price arrived at University Medical Center on March 20th at 11:02 a.m., having taken the first available flight from Phoenix. The reunion, conducted under supervision of hospital psychiatric staff, lasted 30 minutes. Cassandra showed minimal recognition of her parents at first, staring at them with uncertainty. When Jennifer Price began crying and reached for Cassandra's hand, Cassandra whispered, "I remember you. You were my mother in the deceived world. The Prophet said you would forget me." Michael Price told investigators, "She looked at us like we were ghosts. My daughter was somewhere inside that traumatized person, but she couldn't reach us." Over the following 2 weeks, as Cassandra's physical condition stabilized, psychiatric evaluation revealed the depth of her trauma. Dr. Thornton conducted daily sessions, working carefully to avoid triggering severe dissociative episodes. Cassandra's early testimonies were fragmented, contradictory, and marked by significant gaps in memory. She repeatedly referred to the Prophet and the compound in the Valley of Stones and the sacred work of purification. On March 25th, Cassandra provided the first coherent account of what happened after she disappeared from the hiking trail. She stated that on March 21, 2009, around noon, she had left the main trail to photograph a distinctive rock formation. She walked approximately 100 yards from the trail, focused on getting the perfect angle. When she turned to rejoin the trail, she realized she couldn't see the path clearly due to similar-looking rock formations in all directions. Cassandra attempted to retrace her steps, but became disoriented. She walked for what she estimated was 15 minutes, becoming increasingly anxious. She stated, "I knew I should stay put and wait for the group to find me, but I panicked. I kept thinking I'd see the trail around the next rocks. I just kept getting more lost." At approximately 12:45 p.m., Exhausted and frightened, Cassandra encountered two people she described as a man and a woman, both wearing strange clothing that looked handmade from animal skins. The man was approximately 45 years old, tall with a long gray-streaked beard. The woman was younger, perhaps 35, with matted hair and scarring on her arms. The man told Cassandra he was part of a religious community living in harmony with the desert and that she could rest at their compound while they helped her contact rangers. Cassandra, desperate and disoriented, accepted their offer. The man and woman led Cassandra through increasingly rough terrain for what felt like several hours. They gave her water to drink that tasted bitter, and Cassandra began feeling drowsy and disoriented. When Cassandra questioned where they were going, the man's demeanor changed. He grabbed her arm forcibly and told her, "The prophet has been shown your arrival in a vision. You were sent to us for purification." Cassandra attempted to flee, but the woman blocked her path while the man overpowered her. Cassandra's memory of the next several hours was fragmented, suggesting she had been drugged. When she regained full awareness, she found herself in a crude compound built into a desert canyon. Multiple structures existed: a main shelter dug into a canyon wall and covered with tarps, a storage area, a worship space with a stone altar, and sleeping quarters. 7 other people were present: the man who had captured her, whom everyone called the prophet, the woman who had helped capture her, referred to as Sister Ruth, and 5 other individuals who went by names like Brother Joshua, Brother Michael, Sister Grace, Brother Thomas, and Sister Anne. Cassandra would later learn that all of them had been living at the compound for years, all having been captured or recruited similarly. The prophet, whose real name Cassandra never learned with certainty, explained that they were a purification community, living according to divine revelations he received directly from God. He spoke in rambling philosophical language mixing distorted Christianity, survivalism, and anti-modern ideology. He stated that civilization had corrupted humanity, and that only through separation, labor, suffering, and submission to divine will could the soul achieve purity. The prophet claimed divine visions had shown him that lost souls would wander into the desert, sent to him for salvation. He interpreted Cassandra's arrival as confirmation of his prophetic mission. Over the first 2 months, Cassandra attempted to escape 7 times. Each attempt resulted in capture, as the captors knew the terrain intimately, and Cassandra remained disoriented and physically weakened from minimal food. Each recapture brought punishment: isolation in a pit dug into the ground, forced labor without food or water, and burns inflicted with heated stones as purification of rebellious spirit. The compound was located in an extremely remote desert canyon approximately 40 miles from Joshua Tree National Park, in terrain so rugged and isolated that it received no casual visitors. Daily life involved exhausting manual labor, hauling water from a distant spring 2 miles away, gathering wood for fires, tending a minimal garden in a shaded area, constructing additional structures from scavenged materials, and what the prophet called spiritual purification, involving hours of chanting, fasting, and meditation in the desert heat. Food was severely limited: desert plants, small animals trapped in snares, and minimal cultivated vegetables. The prophet maintained absolute control through a combination of physical intimidation, psychological manipulation, and complete isolation from the outside world. He presented himself as receiving divine instructions directly from God, speaking in visions and prophecies. He told Cassandra and the others that their families had forgotten them, that the outside world had moved on, and that their only purpose was to serve the sacred work. He alternated between displays of affection and explosive violence, keeping everyone in a state of fearful compliance. Brother Joshua, approximately 30 years old, had been with the prophet the longest, since approximately 2004. He was completely devoted to the prophet's ideology and served as an enforcer and true believer. Sister Ruth had been at the compound since approximately 2006, and she showed signs of severe psychological damage. Cassandra later learned that Ruth had disappeared while hiking alone near Death Valley in March 2006. The other members had arrived between 2005 and 2008, all having been hikers or campers who became lost or disoriented and were recruited by the prophet or his followers. Cassandra connected most closely with Sister Grace, who had been at the compound since 2007. Late at night, when they shared the sleeping area, Grace would sometimes whisper about her life before. She had been a teacher in San Diego, engaged to be married. The camping trip where she disappeared was supposed to be a solo retreat to clear her mind before the wedding. Grace told Cassandra that during her first year of captivity she had fought constantly and tried to escape repeatedly. She showed Cassandra scars on her back from being beaten with a stick. She said the prophet had broken her right hand deliberately to prevent her escape, and it had healed incorrectly, leaving 2 fingers permanently crooked. Grace whispered to Cassandra, "You survive by surrendering. If you keep fighting, he'll break you completely or let you die. Pretend to believe. Work without complaint. Wait." Cassandra followed Grace's advice. She stopped attempting escape after the 7th failure. She participated in the religious rituals without resistance. She worked until exhaustion without complaint. She accepted the tattoo marking, circular symbols the prophet called seals of divine recognition, without protest. She watched herself transform. Her body adapted to starvation rations. Her feet developed thick calluses. Her hands grew scarred. Her mind learned to dissociate during the worst moments. Time became impossible to track accurately. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. The prophet forbade any method of tracking dates or maintaining calendars, calling such things attachments to the deceived world. Cassandra estimated passage of time by seasons: summer heat, fall cooling, winter cold, spring warmth, summer again, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. She believed approximately 3 years had passed but couldn't be certain. The prophet's obsession was construction of what he called a temple of purification, essentially a large stone and adobe structure he believed would serve as the spiritual center when his movement expanded. Cassandra and the others spent over 2 years hauling stones, mixing adobe from desert clay, digging foundation trenches and assembling the framework under the prophet's fanatical supervision. The work was brutally exhausting in the desert heat and seemed endless. Winter of 2010 was particularly harsh for desert conditions. The compound had minimal heating, only fire pits and crude shelters offering little protection from cold desert nights. Cassandra developed severe frostbite on 3 toes. Grace's improperly healed hand caused her constant pain. Food became even scarcer as winter made foraging difficult and animals scarce. The prophet's behavior grew increasingly erratic and violent. He conducted longer worship sessions lasting 6 to 8 hours, spoke about apocalyptic visions with growing intensity, and implemented harsher punishments for perceived failures in devotion. In February 2011, Brother Joshua became seriously ill. He developed what Cassandra believed was a ruptured appendix. Severe abdominal pain, fever, vomiting, progressive weakness. The prophet refused to allow anyone to seek medical help, stating that illness was a test of faith and that Joshua must overcome it through prayer. Joshua deteriorated rapidly over 3 days. Cassandra and Grace begged the prophet to get help, offering to walk to the nearest road. They were punished with 5 days of isolation in the pit for doubting divine will. On February 18, 2011, by Cassandra's later estimation, Brother Joshua died in agony. Cassandra woke to find him cold and rigid, his face frozen in pain. Cassandra's testimony about this moment stated, "Grace and I held each other and cried. The prophet said Joshua's soul had completed its purification and transcended to a higher plane. He made us thank God for Joshua's completion. We buried him in the desert, and the prophet forbade us from ever speaking his name again." The prophet, brothers Michael and Thomas, and sisters Ruth and Anne, forced Cassandra and Grace to help carry Joshua's body to a remote wash, approximately 1 mile from the compound. They buried him in a shallow grave, covering the site with rocks. The prophet forbade any memorial or mention of Joshua's name. Cassandra stated, "After Joshua died, something inside me died too. I stopped being Cassandra. I became Sister Seeker completely. I worked, I prayed, I existed, but Cassandra was gone." Months passed in a fog of labor, religious indoctrination, and psychological absence. Cassandra could not later account for much of 2011 with any specific details. She described the experience as being a machine, moving and working but not feeling or remembering. In November 2011, the prophet's behavior changed dramatically. He began speaking about an imminent divine revelation and the final gathering of souls. He grew increasingly agitated, sleeping little, conducting worship sessions that lasted all night. Brothers Michael and Thomas seemed disturbed by the prophet's deteriorating state, but remained obedient through fear. On January 22, 2012, the prophet suffered what appeared to be a severe stroke. Cassandra and the others found him collapsed near the worship area at dawn, unable to speak clearly, the left side of his body paralyzed. Brother Michael panicked, uncertain what to do. For the first time, Cassandra saw genuine fear in Michael's eyes rather than devotion. The prophet died 4 days later, never regaining coherent speech. After the prophet's death, the compound descended into chaos. Brothers Michael and Thomas, whose entire identities had been built around serving the prophet, fell apart psychologically. Michael sat by the prophet's body for 3 days, refusing to eat or move. Thomas began ranting about demons and divine judgment. On January 30th, Michael told the group he was leaving to find other believers and bring back guidance. He took minimal supplies and departed into the desert. Cassandra never saw him again. Thomas remained at the compound but became increasingly unstable, talking to himself, refusing to eat, claiming he saw visions of the prophet. On February 6th, Thomas walked away from the compound and did not return. Sister Ruth, psychologically the most damaged, refused to acknowledge the prophet was dead, speaking to his corpse as if he were alive. On February 10th, Ruth wandered into the desert muttering about joining the prophet in transcendence. She never returned. Cassandra, Grace, and Sister Anne were left alone at the compound. For the first time in years, Cassandra felt the possibility of freedom, but she was also terrified. The compound had been her entire world for so long that the concept of leaving seemed impossible. Grace and Anne were in even worse psychological condition, unable to make decisions, afraid to leave the only reality they knew. The 3 women remained at the compound for nearly 2 weeks, maintaining the routines because they didn't know what else to do. On February 23, 2012, Cassandra decided they needed to try to find help. She tried to convince Grace and Anne to come with her, but both refused. Grace said, "I can't go back. Who I was before is dead. I belong here now." Anne was even more adamant, claiming the prophet would return and resurrect himself. Cassandra spent an entire day trying to persuade them, but neither would leave. On February 24th, Cassandra left the compound alone, following what she believed was a direction toward roads and civilization. She walked for days through the desert, surviving on minimal water from occasional springs and whatever she could scavenge. She became severely dehydrated and disoriented multiple times, nearly dying several times. Cassandra wandered in roughly the direction of Las Vegas, covering what investigators later estimated was over 200 miles through extremely rugged desert terrain over approximately 3 weeks. She avoided contact with people initially, twice seeing hikers in the distance and hiding. When she finally reached the outskirts of Las Vegas in mid-March 2012, she was in a state of profound psychological dissociation. The city overwhelmed her with lights, sounds, and people. She had been conditioned by the prophet to view cities as places of corruption, and approaching civilization triggered intense fear. Cassandra spent several days on the outskirts, sleeping in abandoned structures, scavenging food from dumpsters. On March 14th, hunger and desperation overcame her fear, and she approached the Fremont Street area. When she began asking for money, she was unconsciously mimicking behavior the prophet had required, gathering offerings for the sacred work. Her appearance on the street finally brought her into contact with Michael Rodriguez and medical care. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and FBI immediately launched a joint investigation into Cassandra's captivity. Detective Marcus Sullivan led a team of 6 investigators, supported by FBI specialists in kidnapping and cult crimes. Cassandra's fragmented testimonies provided crucial information, but presented significant challenges. Her sense of time was severely distorted. Her memories of the compound's location were imprecise, and her psychological state made sustained interviews difficult. Psychiatrists warned that pushing too hard for details could trigger severe dissociative episodes. On March 28, 2012, Cassandra worked with investigators using maps and descriptions of terrain features. She identified the general area where she believed the compound existed, remote desert terrain approximately 40 miles east of Joshua Tree National Park, in a canyon system with distinctive rock formations. On April 2nd, a combined team from the FBI, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, and National Park Service began searching a 60-square-mile area of remote desert wilderness. They used helicopters for aerial reconnaissance and ground teams for detailed investigation of canyon systems. On April 9, 2012, at 3:30 p.m., searchers located a site matching Cassandra's description. The compound existed exactly as she had described. Multiple structures built into a desert canyon, hidden under overhangs, and camouflaged with desert brush, approximately 43 miles southeast of Joshua Tree National Park, in Bureau of Land Management territory. Lead investigator FBI Special Agent Carolyn Meeks documented the scene extensively. The site showed clear evidence of long-term human habitation spanning approximately 8 years. The main shelter was dug into a canyon wall, reinforced with scavenged lumber and covered with tarps and camouflage netting. A workshop area contained primitive tools, stone blades, woodworking implements, metal pieces scavenged from abandoned mining operations. A worship area featured a crude altar constructed from desert stones, with symbols carved into the canyon walls. The symbols matched the tattoos on Cassandra's shoulders. Fire pits showed years of continuous use, and forensic analysis of charcoal layers confirmed habitation, dating back to at least 2004. Investigators found minimal supplies, some clothing made from animal hides, and critically, multiple notebooks. The notebooks, protected in plastic containers, contained extensive writings attributed to the prophet. The writings consisted of religious ramblings, apocalyptic prophecies, detailed plans for the compound's expansion, and disturbing logs documenting souls sent for purification. The logs included names: Grace Patterson, mentioned with arrival date of April 2007. Cassandra Price, referenced as Sister Seeker, with arrival date of March 2009. Joshua Brennan, referenced as Brother Joshua, with arrival date of June 2004 and death date of February 2011. Several other names appeared: Ruth Morrison, Michael Stevens, Thomas Caldwell, Ann Williams. Investigators immediately cross-referenced these names with missing persons databases throughout the western United States. Grace Patterson, age 31, had been reported missing after failing to return from a solo camping trip near Anza Borrego Desert State Park on April 15, 2007. Joshua Brennan, age 28, had disappeared while hiking in Death Valley National Park on June 8, 2004. Ruth Morrison had been reported missing from a hiking trip near Lake Mead on March 12, 2006. Michael Stevens disappeared near Red Rock Canyon in August 2008. Thomas Caldwell was reported missing from Joshua Tree in October 2007. Ann Williams had disappeared near the Mojave National Preserve in May 2008. None had ever been found, and all had been presumed dead after extensive searches. On April 12, using information from the notebooks and Cassandra's testimony, investigators located a burial site approximately 1 mile northeast of the main compound. Forensic excavation revealed skeletal remains of an adult male in a shallow grave covered with rocks. Clothing fragments and dental records subsequently confirmed the remains as Joshua Brennan. Cause of death was determined to be peritonitis from a ruptured appendix, with contributing factors of severe malnutrition and lack of medical care. The FBI issued alerts for Grace Patterson, Ruth Morrison, Michael Stevens, Thomas Caldwell, and Ann Williams, all last known to be at the compound in early 2012. Investigators attempted to identify the prophet through analysis of his writings and possessions found at the compound. A breakthrough came on April 18 when forensic document analysts matched handwriting in the notebooks to samples from a man named Robert Nathan Keller. Keller, born in 1959, had a documented history of involvement in survivalist and fringe religious groups. Records showed he had lived in Nevada and California during the 1990s, with multiple arrests for trespassing and assault. He had served 2 years in prison for assault with a deadly weapon and been released in 2001. Investigation into Keller's background revealed he had been fired from a security job in Las Vegas in 2003 after making threatening religious statements to co-workers. He disappeared from known addresses in early 2004, and acquaintances assumed he had moved out of state. Former co-workers described him as intelligent, manipulative, and increasingly obsessed with apocalyptic beliefs. A sister in Oregon, interviewed on April 22, confirmed from photographs that the remains of the prophet matched her brother Robert. She stated she had not been in contact with him since 2002 and was not surprised by the investigation's findings, saying, "Robert always believed God spoke directly to him. He thought modern society was evil. I knew he'd end up doing something terrible eventually." The search for the missing compound members intensified through May and June 2012. Investigators circulated photographs and descriptions based on Cassandra's accounts and database records. On May 15, 2012, hikers discovered human remains in a remote desert wash approximately 12 miles from the compound. The remains were male, estimated age 35 to 45, deceased approximately 3 to 4 months. DNA analysis confirmed the remains were Michael Stevens. Cause of death was determined to be exposure and dehydration, likely occurring shortly after he left the compound in late January. On June 8, 2012, Bureau of Land Management Rangers discovered a second body in a canyon approximately 18 miles from the compound. The remains were male, estimated age 40 to 50, deceased approximately 4 months. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Thomas Caldwell. Cause of death was determined to be a combination of exposure, dehydration, and injuries consistent with a fall from a significant height. The search for Grace Patterson, Ruth Morrison, and Ann Williams continued through the summer of 2012. Search teams explored hundreds of square miles of desert terrain, checking every wash, canyon, and shelter site. On July 22, 2012, a search team discovered remains in a cave approximately 8 miles from the compound. The skeletal remains were those of an adult female, deceased approximately 5 to 6 months. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Ruth Morrison. Evidence at the scene suggested Ruth had sought shelter in the cave, but succumbed to exposure and dehydration. Intensive searches through August and September failed to locate Grace Patterson or Ann Williams. On October 3, 2012, the search effort was officially scaled back, with Grace Patterson and Ann Williams listed as missing and presumed deceased. With the death of Robert Nathan Keller and the deaths or disappearances of the compound members, no criminal prosecution could proceed against the primary perpetrator. The case was officially closed from a prosecution standpoint on October 20, 2012. The San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office released a comprehensive report concluding that Keller had operated a captive compound in remote desert wilderness for approximately 8 years, holding at least 7 victims, resulting in at least 4 confirmed deaths and 2 presumed deaths. The report stated, "This investigation reveals a systematic pattern of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and negligent homicide resulting in multiple deaths. The death of the perpetrator prevents criminal prosecution, but the evidence overwhelmingly supports these conclusions." Memorial services were held for Joshua Brennan, Michael Stevens, Thomas Caldwell, and Ruth Morrison. Their families, who had spent years without answers, finally received remains for proper burial. Memorial services were also held for Grace Patterson and Ann Williams, though their bodies were never recovered. Grace Patterson's fiancé, Danielle Rodriguez, stated at a press conference, "For 5 years, I didn't know what happened to Grace. Our wedding day came and went. I had to move on with my life not knowing. Now I know she was a victim. Cassandra's survival gave us truth, even though the truth is devastating." Cassandra Price remained hospitalized under psychiatric care until June 2012. Her treatment involved intensive trauma therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication for severe PTSD and dissociative disorders. Dr. Michael Thornton, her primary psychiatrist, diagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, dissociative identity disturbance, and what he termed cult indoctrination syndrome. Treatment focused on grounding techniques, processing traumatic memories gradually, rebuilding basic trust in reality and human relationships, and slowly reintegrating her sense of self before captivity. Cassandra struggled with severe nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks in crowded spaces, difficulty distinguishing past from present during stress, and profound guilt regarding Joshua Brennan's death and leaving Grace Patterson and Ann Williams behind. She repeatedly expressed to therapists that she should have done more to save Joshua, though rationally she acknowledged no action she could have taken would have changed the outcome. She struggled even more intensely with guilt about leaving Grace and Ann, despite understanding they had refused to come with her. Cassandra was discharged to outpatient care in June 2012, living with her parents in Phoenix. She attended therapy 5 times weekly initially, gradually reducing to 3 times weekly by late 2012. She worked on basic reintegration tasks: walking to the mailbox, going to a grocery store, sitting in a coffee shop without panic. Each step was extraordinarily challenging. As of December 2012, Cassandra remained unable to return to independent living. Her psychiatrist estimated that meaningful recovery would require many years and that she would likely experience trauma symptoms for the rest of her life. Tyler Bennett, Cassandra's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, visited her several times after her recovery. Their relationship could not be resumed. Tyler had graduated, started a career, and moved on during the years she was missing. Tyler later stated to reporters, "The Cassie I knew doesn't exist anymore. She survived something unimaginable, but it changed her completely. I wish her healing, but we can't go back to what we were." Jennifer Price told reporters in November 2012, "We have our daughter back and we're grateful every day. But Cassie is fighting a battle every moment. The physical wounds will heal, but the psychological wounds may never fully heal. We're learning to know this new version of our daughter and support her however we can." The National Park Service and Bureau of Land Management implemented several changes following the investigation. Enhanced monitoring systems were installed for remote desert areas, including more frequent ranger patrols and aerial surveillance. New protocols strongly encouraged hikers to carry personal locator beacons and satellite communication devices. Educational materials about desert safety were revised to emphasize the importance of staying on marked trails, not wandering off alone, and the risks posed by both natural hazards and potentially dangerous individuals. A public awareness campaign highlighted Cassandra's case as an example of how quickly situations can deteriorate when people become separated from their groups in wilderness environments. Bureau of Land Management officials acknowledged the investigation revealed the challenges of monitoring vast remote areas. Spokesperson Daniel Morrison stated, "Robert Keller operated a criminal compound on public land for 8 years without detection. That reality is deeply troubling. We're implementing enhanced monitoring, but we must be realistic that complete surveillance of millions of acres of desert is not feasible." Investigators examining missing persons cases throughout California, Nevada, and Arizona identified 23 unsolved disappearances in desert wilderness areas between 2003 and 2012 that showed patterns potentially consistent with Keller's activities. None could be definitively connected, but the similarities raised troubling questions about whether additional victims existed before Joshua Brennan in 2004 or in other locations. The case revealed uncomfortable truths about wilderness vulnerability, even in popular recreation areas. Keller's compound existed less than 50 miles from heavily visited national parks, yet remained completely undetected for 8 years. His victims were not reckless or unprepared. They were ordinary people engaging in normal outdoor recreation who made small navigational errors or experienced moments of disorientation. Their disappearances could have happened to anyone. Cassandra Price's survival was attributed to multiple factors: physical resilience, her decision to follow Grace Patterson's advice about compliance, the chaotic disintegration of the compound following Keller's death, and her determination to walk to civilization despite severe psychological and physical challenges. Detective Sullivan noted, "Cassandra survived because she adapted to captivity, which came at tremendous psychological cost. She did what she had to do to stay alive. Now she has to live with the consequences of those survival choices including the guilt of leaving others behind, even though staying would have meant her death. As of late 2012, several questions remained unanswered. What happened to Grace Patterson and Ann Williams after Cassandra left the compound? Did Keller capture additional victims before Joshua Brennan in 2004? Were there other compounds or locations Keller used before establishing the canyon site? How did Keller initially establish the compound and acquire supplies over the years? The investigation remained technically open for these questions, though active searching ceased by November 2012. Cassandra Price's case became a focal point for discussions about wilderness safety, mental health support for trauma survivors, cult psychology, and the investigation of remote area crimes. Her story was covered extensively in regional and national media through 2012 and 2013. Documentary filmmakers and true crime journalists requested interviews, which Cassandra declined through her attorney. Her parents released a statement asking for privacy and stating, "Cassandra is not ready to share her story publicly and may never be ready. We ask that people respect her need for healing and distance from media attention. She is working every day to rebuild her life, and that requires privacy and support." The families of Joshua Brennan, Grace Patterson, Ruth Morrison, Michael Stevens, Thomas Caldwell, and Ann Williams receive settlements from victim compensation funds. Civil lawsuits against the National Park Service and Bureau of Land Management were discussed but never filed, as attorneys determined governmental immunity protections would make successful litigation extremely difficult. A memorial plaque was placed at the Hidden Valley Campground in Joshua Tree National Park, where Cassandra's camping trip began. The plaque reads, "In memory of those lost to wilderness tragedies, may we remain vigilant, cautious, and protective of one another." By late 2012, Cassandra Price was learning to navigate a world that had continued without her for 3 years. Technology had advanced with smartphones now ubiquitous and social media pervasive. Friends had graduated, started careers, married, moved on with their lives. Her previous career aspirations in marketing seemed impossibly distant. She struggled with the simplest aspects of modern life. Automatic doors, crowded spaces, loud noises, even television overwhelmed her. She preferred quiet, solitude, and simplicity, but was working to accept human connection again under therapeutic guidance. In October 2012, Cassandra participated in a single recorded interview with Detective Sullivan for the case file. She stated, "People ask if I'm grateful to be alive. I am. But the person who was Cassandra Price died in that desert. I survived. But I lost 3 years of life I'll never recover. I watched Joshua die. I left Grace and Ann behind. Coming back doesn't erase that. It just means I'm in a different kind of survival mode now. One where I have to figure out how to be human again, how to be Cassandra again, if that's even possible." The desert wilderness of the Southwest continues to draw millions of visitors annually. Most experience its beauty, challenge, and solitude safely, returning home with memories of stunning landscapes and personal accomplishment. But the desert holds dangers beyond natural hazards, beyond heat and dehydration, and getting lost. It holds the possibility of encountering someone whose connection to reality has fractured, someone who sees isolation as opportunity, someone who interprets lost hikers as divine gifts rather than people in need of help. 4 people are confirmed dead who should be alive: Joshua Brennan, Michael Stevens, Thomas Caldwell, and Ruth Morrison. 2 people are missing and presumed dead: Grace Patterson and Ann Williams. 1 person survived who will carry those 3 years forever: Cassandra Nicole Price. And somewhere in the vast desert wilderness, questions remain about whether other victims existed before Joshua Brennan in 2004, whether other families still wonder what happened to someone who simply never came home from a hike, whether other compounds existed that were never discovered. The desert still calls to adventurers seeking beauty, challenge, and the experience of wilderness solitude. But Cassandra Price's story serves as a reminder that danger exists not only in the form of scorpions, rattlesnakes, and extreme temperatures, but in the human element, the possibility that a wrong turn, a moment of disorientation, an encounter with a seemingly helpful stranger can lead to years of captivity and suffering. The wilderness is both beautiful and terrible, offering transcendence and tragedy, sometimes separated by nothing more than a single decision made in a moment of fear and confusion. Cassandra Price made it back to civilization, but the price of survival was the loss of who she had been, the trauma of what she witnessed, and the burden of knowing others remain missing because she couldn't save them. The desert kept its secrets for 3 years before releasing her, and it still holds secrets about Grace Patterson and Ann Williams, about whether others suffered at Keller's hands before 2004, about the true scope of what happened in that hidden canyon. Some questions will never be fully answered, some losses can never be recovered, and some survivors will carry wounds that never fully heal. Even when they escape and return to the world they once knew,